What's good, y'all? Hope everybody's well. Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. It's been a bit of a crazy week. My apologies for missing my live show last night, but I thought I'd get a quick one in today as I get back on this horse. What's up, Javon? Uneducated Lame. Hope y'all are well. Let's see here. All right. Damn. Been a weird day. Man. Got the privilege of teaching my black male class today, so we were going through some of the data related to black men and stereotypes, and rape statistics. So it was interesting. Always good to be introducing a whole new generation to the ideas that I hope will set them apart from what I grew up learning. So it is what it is. What's up, D-Hive? What's going on? So like I said, it's going to be a short hit, but I had a good brother of mine send me something that I thought worthy of some reflection. Shout out to Quadwo. This was a video that was talked about on a number of different platforms, but it was something I saw on ABC News. And it's a piece that I was alerted to about a 14-year-old 8th grader. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I think it's Zakaya Hussein, but interesting young man, apparently got into an altercation at a mall. And I'm going to show you the report so you can check it out for yourself and see what exactly happened. So let's take a look. And sharing this from obviously from ABC News. Right? Damn, I forget what I was going to say about that. There's all these terms we're supposed to use that I forgot the damn term we're supposed to use. Appreciate that, D. Smitty. And by the way, thank you. Yeah, please support the show. Like, share, subscribe, join, donate, support the channel if you would. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, Black Pill Gnostic. I couldn't remember. Fair use. Thank you. Here we go. Make sure the sound is up here. All right.
Governor tonight saying that he finds the video disturbing. Video showing the fight and then the police response. One teen appearing to be left alone, sitting down on a couch, while the other is pinned on the floor and then handcuffed. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy tonight saying he is disturbed by what appears to be racially disparate treatment of the boys. ABC's Stephanie Ramos from New Jersey.
Tonight, authorities investigating the use of force of 2 officers in New Jersey after this video surfaced, raising questions of racial bias in policing. A fight breaking out at the Bridgewater Mall in New Jersey over the weekend. Police respond and tackle one teen.
Now, let me say, as you're seeing this, they didn't start it, as early as they could have. This is a 14-year-old boy who is advocating for a friend. And this older Caucasian kid is bullying them. So he's fighting an older teen and protecting his friend in response to a bully. And the police come over to break up the fight. But a lot of this needed some context. But anyway, so that's the difference here. It's probably he's younger than the white teenager he's dealing with, and he's smaller.
To the ground while the other sits down on a couch and is then left sitting alone as both officers cuff 8th grader Kai, who spoke to ABC station WABC.
The male officer put his knee in my back, and then he started putting me in cuffs, and then the female officer came over, put her knee on my upper back too, and started helping put the cuffs on me, and while he was just sitting down on the couch watching the whole thing.
In the video, you can see the other teen holding up his hands to be handcuffed, but the officer walks right past him. Bridgewater Township Police releasing a statement saying in part, "We recognize that this video has made members of our community upset and are calling for an internal affairs investigation." New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy speaking about the incident today.
We have to let the investigation play out. The appearance of what is racially disparate treatment is deeply, deeply disturbing.
Tonight, Kai's mom is calling for accountability.
To be honest, I want them to become unemployable.
The mall here in Bridgewater released a statement saying they are aware of the incident and that both young individuals have been banned from this property for the next 3 years. David.
All right, Stephanie.
Okay, now that's already problematic, right? Now, I like what the mother had to say, even though they cut her off real quick. So I'm curious to know what else she had to add to that. She said she wanted them to both be unemployable, and that's mainly because we tend to know that police officers like this just get shuffled from one department to another, and maybe at worst suffer a few days at home with no pay at best. This kind of situation, I don't know where it's going to go. But real quick, shout out to Boomer Hook. Appreciate that support, as well as Giyogami. I don't know if I mispronounced that. If so, I apologize. Shout out to you. What's up, AB? Baba the Storyteller. What's going on, good brother? Good to see you. But yeah, this is I thought this was an interesting piece because you have the narrative stripped from this to the point where it just looks like a fight. And from there, you can clearly see the police treating both boys differently. Now, there are two concepts that play out in this that I think give us a framework to work with. Now, I talked about this a couple weeks ago when I was dealing with Jim Sidanius and social dominance theory and his particular concept, subordinate male target hypothesis. And basically what that refers to is that whenever you have one group oppressing another, it's principally going to be the males of the dominant group attacking and targeting the males of the group that's most oppressed. And that's really one of the things you see here in this instance, not necessarily between the boys per se, even though one might make that argument depending on the details of the story, but more so in regard to how the police chose who to target as a problem, right? The smaller, younger black male. Now, technically, if you want to make this about threat, he was the least threat out of the two. They targeted him and didn't even handcuff the other boy, right? So in that respect, you can see some of Sidanius coming out in terms of letting you know, even on a subconscious level, who these people identify as the primary threat, even when they're the least threatening. But the other concept that I think is important to deal with, appreciate that support, Uneducated Lane, appreciate that, Kay. No, I didn't see a father interview. Isn't that interesting? But anyway, the other concept is something I've talked about a few years ago, and I haven't talked about it a lot. But it is what I refer to as the black male dual economy. And basically what that means, without all the transitions and nuance to the concept, is that as a black male, almost regardless of age, hell, even in the womb, we tend to die more than other demographics, including black girls. There's a tax, so to speak. There's an extra fee that you kind of have to pay in life that others don't. And so you can measure it almost on a daily basis in terms of what you have to deal with that others don't. You can also look at it retroactively. You can look at somebody who is an adult, who is in whatever station they are in life, and you can go backwards and question how much further they might be if they didn't have to grapple with what they have to grapple with. Or, for example, you could look at somebody the same age as Zakiah, say 10 years from now. And I hope the brother does well. I hope this doesn't set him back, but I'm simply saying in terms of the concept of the black male dual economy, you could take somebody his same age, and it could be even a black woman for that matter, and you could ask yourself how much her not having to deal with the same issues may have affected where she got to. So the dual economy in that respect has to do with really just kind of quantifying the differences and the options made available based on what one has to grapple with or what one doesn't have to grapple with, right? And as a black male, you can see the tax, you can see the fee, right? It may have impacted why they were getting bullied in the first place. I can't say. I don't know enough about that, but I can say the perception that these officers had of who was the threat is definitely one of the taxes of being a black male, even if you're an underage young man. Tax is still there. and he's still having to pay it. And quite frankly, when I first heard about the story, every line I read, just getting the basics of the story, I was afraid was going to end with him having been killed. Now, I can tell you that's even more magnified as a father. Right? Y'all know I talk about my son all the time. Came home today, told me that, car full of people were driving by him, and they all started throwing rocks at him as they drove by. He couldn't see their faces. They didn't say anything. They just were laughing out loud. He couldn't even make out what race they were. So, as a father to a black boy, and having been a black boy at a certain point in time, the fear of not being able to make it home over just the slightest of moments is palpable. And it's constant. It's constant. If he's not within my sight, I'm always thinking of what could happen. Always. I got two special cabinets in my house in preparation for what might happen. Yeah. So even looking at a story like this, when I look at a young man that could very well be my son, or very well could have been me over 30 years ago, and I've been in those situations like he did. You never know. I remember when I was that young, I got in trouble once, got thrown in the back of a police car. And for all I knew, they were supposed to take me in. I won't go through the details, but I will tell you, the cop brought me home. It could have gone a whole nother way. I never found that guy, but shout out to him. He took me home instead of taking me where he could have. And when my mother asked him why, he said, "You see the vocabulary on that kid?" He said, "He doesn't belong where I would take him. So I'm going to give him one more chance." Took me home. That, I don't think, is a regular occurrence. In other words, it's not something that I would take for granted would happen to every black kid. I treat it more like a bolt of lightning kind of issue. And you hope that if your child has to get into any circumstance, that there'll be somebody willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Is that the norm for black boys? No. And what this young man dealt with tonight is evidence of that same dynamic. Shout out to Brotherly Love. What's up, Damon? Hope everything's well. Appreciate that, K, Uneducated Lane. Thanks for the support. But yeah, I'm glad he's alive. I rejoice in it. But this is the tax he has to pay. And this is the tax we all have to pay. This is what I mean by the black male dual economy. It is a constant set of fees that one has to pay. That can very well take your life at any given moment. And others don't have to pay it. So they don't understand why your quality of life is different. And if anything, and this is even intra-racially speaking, you'll often hear people tell black men, well, you should have just worked harder. You should have just sucked it up. I don't know why you're not doing as well as I am. These kind of, random statements that completely dismiss the context that they're unaware of because they don't have to live with it. And I see this breakdown by gender as well. Because this is not the reality of most black girls and black women. It's not. They tend to not notice it or not really understand it. And often you'll hear mothers, disciplining their boys for having dealt with it. But when you look at this situation as an example, he was actually standing up for himself and his friend. This is something to actually be applauded, even though, as a parent, you want to applaud the integrity it took for him to stand up, but you're terrified of what could have happened. That's the reality of being a father or a parent to a black male. To applaud that young brother's strength and at the same time be grateful he didn't catch a bullet. Or that when they leaned their knees on his back, they didn't put them in the wrong place and leave him there for over 8 minutes and 46 seconds. But the other reason I wanted to show this video not only to honor Zakiah, and I do, is to also point out, going back to Sidanius in a way, what happens when black males stand up? They fear black males. As a matter of fact, most have been socialized to fear black males. I met people that weren't even from this country who had not ever formally met a black male that knew to be afraid of black males. Hell, I went to a trip. I think I was probably about 18, 19 years old. I went to a trip to Korea. And I remember I sat with a Korean family, a wealthy Korean family. And all they knew about African Americans was from hip hop. Of course, you had soldiers there, but still, they looked at them through a lens of pop media. And for African American males, pop media in Korea was hip hop. Right? They knew about Death Row. They knew about key rappers, Tupac, so on and so forth. And that was the lens they saw us through. And of course, one of the things they brought up in that discussion was how afraid they were. Knew another brother who was trying to marry, I think she was an Arab young woman, and he of course had to meet with her family. They were Muslims, so he had to pay a dowry and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that they warned their daughter about before they even met him, once they found out what he was to be afraid. Be afraid of two things: that he might abuse her, and that for some strange reason that he might take her credit cards. Those were the two things they were afraid of. And they weren't from here. I don't remember what part of the Middle East they were from, but my point is simply that this has become a global phenomenon, the fear of black men. And the response when black men stand up, whether it's verbally, politically, or even in an individual circumstance like this, where you have a 14-year-old boy standing up for himself and his friend, standing up erect and refusing to be dismissed or bullied. Look at the response. He's 14. How many cops were on his back? Pinned him down. That is reminiscent of the same fear that most black men are responded to with, especially when they speak up. And this is what we have to be cognizant of. This is why Sidanius is talking about subordinate male target hypothesis, because it's not just that the subordinate group is attacked, the subordinate male group, the out-group males. It's not just that they're attacked, but they are feared. It is an irrational fear that is often justification for a hyper or overcorrection, a hyper response, an overcorrected response, so to speak, where young men find themselves killed for walking towards somebody or speaking up or just standing there looking. Shit. This is the kind of thing that we all have to be cognizant of, because I'm hearing more and more black men with a voice that I've never heard before. And they're calling out not only systemic and structural issues in society, they're even calling them out in the community, intra-racially. And it's important. This moment is important. This moment is pregnant with possibility. It can become a lot of things. But we have to be cognizant of how people's fear guides their response to us. Not only in the larger society, but even within our own homes. Yeah. I was talking to my mother the other day, and she made mention of the only time she heard her parents argue. I have a grandfather by marriage who been with her for, over 4 decades at least. Broke up for 10 years, got back together again. Y'all know what black love is. But they were together until she died, and he died not long after. And the one time my mother heard them argue, my grandmother expressed fear at a certain point, and he had to tell her, I would never do anything to you. Mind you, they'd known each other since high school. He had never, by her admission, laid a hand on my grandmother, not once. And still, after decades together, the fear of black men is that palpable. And he demonstrated nothing suggesting that he would ever hurt her. And he never did. Never did. Shout out to Mary and Floyd Pearson. No longer with us. But that moment, when she told me that story, I'd never heard it before. But it blew me away. And one of the things that brought this to mind is how deep the fear of black men is. Even within our own families, even within our own households, even with black men who've demonstrated decades of consistent behavior, how quickly and easily people can revert to fears, even when those fears have no basis in reality. And I mean no disrespect to my grandmother or my grandfather, just an observation. If that can happen to a man that you've been married to for 40 years, who's never laid hands on you, what happens to the brother you work with, who's been cool? He doesn't hang out with you, but he does his thing, does his job, goes home. Does he get the benefit of the doubt when he's questioned? You know how many brothers write to me to tell me how they're accosted at work professionally, especially in white collar spaces, simply because they're just black men working, haven't necessarily done anything. But to attack them, be it professionally, physically, by using the authorities, doing it by proxy, all of these different methods used to attack black men are somehow justified because of the fear of black men. And that is part of the dual economy that we function in, because we have to pay the cost of others' fears. I've almost lost teaching positions because my students found me scary. Tall, big dude, not saying something they liked. That's enough to end somebody's career. Yeah. This is the kind of thing we deal with. Freddie Wayne says every day on my job. Real talk. Real talk. So that's why I want us to be familiar with these concepts. Use them as tools, arrows in the quiver, as it is, to make sense of your reality. Use them to articulate what you need to. Yeah. And this needs to be a conversation black men have so we can, what do we say? Iron sharpens iron. We need to do that. Because at the end of the day, as I've always said, ain't nobody coming for us. If anything, they're coming at us. And anybody, just like the agents in the Matrix, anybody can be a vehicle for black male harm. Sadly enough. But nevertheless, shout out to this young brother standing up. I'm glad he's alive to speak on it. His mother seems to have the right attitude, but I only caught that clip of what she said, and they edited her ass quick, boy. They cut that sentence off right where she said they need to be unemployable, and that was it. So I really wonder what she had to say beyond that. And shout out to the mothers that are actually, advocate for their sons, really. But yeah, and I'm damn sure curious, if the father is involved, what he might have had to say about this. And you're right. I don't see those guys very often. I seldom see fathers interviewed. Hell, I seldom see fathers interviewed when their sons are killed. Yeah. Very rarely. Anyway, like I said, this was going to be a short hit, but I just kind of want to drop that on you. Be mindful of Sedanius' subordinate male target hypothesis. Be mindful of the dual economy that black males pay in terms of other people's fears, other people, and you know what? It's not even limited to fears. It's also it could also be their fetishes. It could also be whatever their particular neuroses are about black men. We had this discussion in my class today. We were talking about the ways in which black males can be sexually objectified, and we were talking about the same mechanism that may have police officers responding with hyper violence toward a black male is the same mechanism that might have a young Caucasian girl chasing you around simply because you might be the mandingo in her fantasy. It's the same mechanism. It's the same irrational perspective on black men. And fear is actually, or can be actually, part of her fetish. It's still objectifying. It may feel good, it may not. believe it or not, it is also the same mechanism that may have her call the police and say you violated her. Same mechanism in each of those instances. And we need to be mindful of how other people's fears may impact us. That is part of the dual economy. That is the tax that you have to pay that others don't. And you have to calculate that cost before you enter the situation, because you don't have the luxury to not do so. The cost may be too high. And you have to be mindful of that. And we have to teach our sons how to be mindful of that, or any young man we mentor who's not been told about this dual economy. Because you can find your ass in jail for the rest of your life paying an economy, paying a greater tax in this economy than others, because of what others think about you, what others fear in you, how others objectify you. And strangely enough, that sexual dynamic even plays out within the community. I can't tell you how many brothers over the last 5 years, and even students, have told me about how even black girlfriends will damn near treat them like white women do. Ask them to play out rape fantasies, ask them to play out various types of sexual objectification games where black men are walking phallices. And that's it. Walking phallices. They're having conversations during sex that sounds no different than a racist white girl that always wanted to know what being with a black man was like, and has a fetish that she's developed, a rape fantasy. These brothers will talk about situations with their girlfriends, with their wives, that don't sound any different. So yes, you can be sexually objectified even within the community along the same lines as with anybody else. You can be falsely accused of a crime or a sexual crime that you didn't commit, simply on the same basis. And the desire to control you as a black man can come from a very similar impulse as it might come from a young Caucasian woman to an African American woman you're dealing with. It is a constant reality for black men that we have to be mindful of, because it can cost you your life. It can cost you your freedom. It can cost you all kinds of things. It can set you back decades simply on the basis of someone else's whim. So unfortunately, the only way I know of that black men can protect themselves is to be hyper vigilant about the economy that they function in, and to be constantly aware that it is not the same economy as others, even when those others are part of your same racial group. And class doesn't always protect you. It can in some instances, but doesn't always. It's not guaranteed. This is the importance of Raj Chetty's work when he talked about black males who are born in upper class settings are still most apt to drop into poverty more than any other demographic. Why? That's the black male dual economy, baby. There is no position where you are protected from it. It can hit you in small amounts or in a large amount. And there really is no predicting when and how. The best you can do is be vigilant and guard your life, guard your well-being by planning ahead, thinking ahead, examining possibilities and weighing them before you engage in certain situations. That's the only reality I know of in terms of how to negotiate that. Right. So anyway, what's up, Micah? See you in there. Donnie, what's going on? Hope you brothers are well. If I missed you, it's not intentional. I'm late on the chat. I'll probably be looking through these a little bit later. But nevertheless, just wanted to shout that warning out to you and get you to also support this brother, Zakiah Hussein. You can look this story up. Z''KYE, last name Husain. And I will put the link to this report in the description. And yeah, so other than that, like I said, I'm not going to hold you long. Hope y'all have a good night. I look forward to your comments, reflections, observations. Y'all have a good one. Peace.